So good evening and welcome to Season 4, Episode 13 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Andrew de Blok, coming to you live from Isdal House in Johannesburg. But tonight we have our main speaker, Dr. Lloyd, joining us from Dahlstrom. With him is also George Skinner. Just quickly, George is the chairperson of the Escarpment Bird Club, the chairperson and founder, I should say. And George is hopefully going to still be with us. He is experiencing load shedding right now, so there's a little bit 50-50 whether we were going to have him or not, but we'll see. But the main presentation will be given by BirdLife South Africa's own Dr. Lloyd. Kyle is the Wetlands Conservation Project Manager at BirdLife South Africa. He's also the Rock Jumper Fellow of White-winged Flufftail Conservation. I hope I got that right, Kyle. Kyle, you can turn your video on and unmute yourself at this point. Kyle's been with BirdLife South Africa for a while. He holds an MSc in conservation as well as his doctorate, and he's spent time on some very interesting projects all around the world, from Marion Island to the Vleis of Dahlstrom. So, Kyle, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you have to tell us about this new, very exciting project venturing into tourism. And I'll hand over the floor to you now if you'd like to take it away.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. And yeah, we look forward to showing more about the birding routes that we've established. So I'll just quickly share my screen now. All right. Andrew, all good?
Perfect, Carl. Thank you.
Great. So I joined BirdLife South Africa in 2020, and part of the job required me to relocate to the town of Dahlstrom, which is located in the Steenkampsberg mountains. And that's where most of our research and conservation work happens with the critically endangered white-winged flufftail. And situated also here is the local Escarpment Bird Club. And in early 2021, we embarked on establishing the Steenkampsberg birding routes. So this is very much a collaborative project between BirdLife South Africa and the Escarpment Bird Club. So I'll just start off by moving straight into the objectives. For myself, who interacts with a lot of the farmers in the surrounding landscape to encourage the conservation of habitats for birds, it's a means of creating a financial incentive for landowners to steward biodiversity on their properties as they derive revenue, hopefully from AV tourism. As well as also what's really important is to create that personal experience for the public to engage with nature. It's one thing to listen to webinars and read resources on the internet, but it's another to actually have all your senses experience nature, where you really develop a compassion and care and investment in nature. So it's a way of, this project's a way of trying to improve both the extrinsic and intrinsic value that we have for biodiversity. And we're hoping to do this by establishing formalized birding routes across the plateau, escarpment, and foothills of the Steenkampsberg. There's just a sort of visualization of how we're hoping that model will work. That is this sort of self-supporting system. So with the public engaging with nature, hopefully awareness is created through that experience. Ecotourism revenue is generated by people, hopefully spending money in the farmlands where accommodation and restaurants and hiking trails are offered. In turn, landowners have that financial incentives for stewardship, and hopefully habitats are maintained and even improved for birds and the diversity they support. And in case you're wondering if AV tourism is viable to support such a project, a report in 2010 found that quite a few birders bring quite a bit of money to South Africa every year. And hopefully this has improved over the years. So while most people are probably familiar with public awareness, others may not be so aware of biodiversity stewardship. So I just want to talk a little bit more about how we approach that. And I promise you, this is my most text-heavy slide. So what is biodiversity stewardship? It's an agreement between provincial authorities, for us that's Mpumalanga Tourism and Parks Agency, and land owners, with the intention of encouraging sustainable management for the benefit of nature conservation alongside daily land use activities. So as conservation bodies, we don't want to in any way hamper the income that people derive from farming, but we rather just want to change management practices so that wildlife is conserved alongside farming. It acknowledges landowners as the custodians of nature and creates a platform for us to engage with the farmers to improve the management of their natural resources. So by being a formal agreement, there is some level of commitment that we get from landowners. It's voluntary, and there's a range of different agreement types, and these have different levels of commitment from the landowners and are accordingly prioritized. There's numerous benefits from biodiversity stewardship, but for me, some of the main ones is a coordinated management objective across the landscape, rather than having fragmented management regimes, as well as protection from external threats. This table just gives you an example of some of those agreements. It's sort of a tiered approach, increasing in the value or biodiversity value of that site, increased site security from those external threats, increasing landowner commitment, as well as having more support from the state. And for us as BirdLife South Africa, we really focus on protected environments and nature reserves, as these are covered under the Protected Areas Act and really gives that level of protection that we need to safeguard these sites. So in the Steenkampsberg, we have Vallei and Vlei Nature Reserve, as well as the recently declared Middelpunt Nature Reserve, as well as the Greater Lakenvlei Protected Environment that we're also currently expanding. So I just want to start off by mentioning a point that we're very proud of with this project is that it is entirely supported or funded by local businesses. Apart from one company, all of these companies are local. And that to me is just an indication of the support that we have from the community, from people who want to see AV tourism flourish. And so, yeah, we just want to thank each and every one of these businesses, and as well as if you do travel any of these routes, to look out for these companies to support them. So where is the Steenkampsberg? Right, so if we have a look at this little map on the side here, we find that it is in northern Mpumalanga province. It actually forms part of the Eastern Escarpment or Drakensberg. So obviously we have the Drakensberg being almighty and impressive in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. And then that dips into the Eastern Free State and drops after Wakkerstrom, where we have the Chrissysmeer Pans. And then the Drakensberg rises again to give us the Steenkampsberg Mountains. And in the Steenkampsberg, we've delineated 3 birding routes, and these take you through various parts of the mountain range and gives you a very comprehensive overview of the landscape. So yeah, we have the 3 routes, this green route, orange and purple. And I'll go into each route now in the next few slides. So located in the town of Dalstrom and along each birding route are these, what we call interactive signboards. So it has an overview of the 3 routes, as well as a QR code. And if you scan this QR code with your phone, it will take you to a dedicated web page housed on the BirdLife South Africa website. And on there, you will find various information resources that we can update as time passes, and where you can have just a safe and secure experience of these different birding routes, knowing that you're confidently on the right farm road. And then along or at the start of each birding route are these circular signboards. And this is just to give you some direction that you're on the right path. You can also, again, scan that QR code at the start of these routes. These signboards aren't distributed throughout the route, unfortunately, just as a result of permissions and the costs involved. But hopefully with the GPS tracks that we've provided, you will not get lost. The QR code does allow us to collect some statistics, and already since the signboards went up 6 months ago, we've had 280 scans. So that's without any formal announcements or any active advocacy for the birding routes. So we're really impressed that people are already showing interest. And just to let you know that the QR code, we can't collect any statistics in terms of your name or your location. It's just pure numbers, so that we have some way of quantifying the success of this project. The QR code is also paid for, so it's protected from any hacking or adverts that could be attached to the QR code. So you can feel safe when you do scan this QR code. Right, this is sort of the first image that you'll get when you scan that QR code and you direct it to the web page. We'll just have a little introduction as well as the map, which you can download as a JPEG. And yeah, we also just, although you could probably do the routes with a high clearance 2x4, we do just recommend 4x4 because the roads can get really slippery and wet, particularly during the wet season. If you scroll down, you'll be taken to the 3 birding routes. So yeah, the first one is the Greater Lakenvlei birding route. And under there, you'll find the GPS tracks. For each route, we've designed 2 ways of getting back to the town of Dahlstrom. So if you've done the route once, you can try it again and take a different route home. And under there, you can download GPS files for Google Maps, as well as Google Earth KMZ file. You can also find a word description of the route to take you a step-by-step sort of descriptive process if you prefer that way of navigating instead. So let's start off with the Greater Lakenvlei birding route. And what this route is famous for are the extensive wetlands. So the Lakenvlei is an extensive wetland system. It's peatlands. It gets its name from the mist that you can often see hanging over the wetlands. So laken is a sheet in Afrikaans. And this route starts off with a wattled crane silhouette with this green border. The top 10 birds that you can see on this route are the blue crane, grey-crowned crane, secretary bird, white-backed duck, red-throated wryneck, buff-streaked chat, southern-billed ibis, eastern long-billed lark, Denham's bustard, and the elusive white-winged flufftail. And please do let me know if you do see the bird. So we've also tried to identify points of interest where you can get out your car, and also at least one hiking route for each route, each birding route, as we do want to cater towards birders as well that don't necessarily want to drive all day, but maybe want to drive and also go for a hike and bird on foot. So the points of interest for the Greater Lakenvlei birding routes are the Dahlstrom Bird of Prey and Rehabilitation Centre. So this is a fantastic group who are trying to rehabilitate birds of prey that have been injured by various means and try to release them back into the wild. And for those birds that can't be rehabilitated to the point of release, they are used for educational purposes. And there's a very entertaining sort of bird talks or bird show where you can see these birds perform, as well as learn about some interesting facts. And you may be lucky enough to have a black eagle or rose eagle perching on your forearm. The hiking trail for this route is the Mpumalanga hiking trail, which has impressive cliffs and valleys and cliff faces with some stunning waterfalls. And if you get hungry along the way, you can visit the Lakenvlei Forest Lodge. This is a SAFCOL-owned property, so you'll need to follow their rules and regulations once on that property. But there is a restaurant there where you can eat and you can also stay there. There's some beautiful wetlands within the plantations, and obviously you can maybe see some raptors flying from tree to tree. Supporters of the birding routes who provide accommodation in the farmlands are Elands Valley Guest Farm, as well as Greystone Lodge. So this is a pet-friendly establishment, and they are also BirdLife South Africa recommended accommodation. We then move on to the Vallei and Vlei birding route. And what this route is famous for are the mountainous terrain. So this route takes you up to the highest point in Mpumalanga province, the Berg Mountain. And our bird for this route is the long-crested eagle. So you'll find this orange circular board at the start of the route. Our top 10 birds are the wattled crane, blue crane, Denham's bustard, yellow-breasted pipit, eastern long-billed lark, grey-ringed francolin, corncrake, grass owl, sentinel rock thrush, and ground woodpecker. The points of interest are the Vallei and Vlei Nature Reserve. Now, I've visited many nature reserves across the country. I have the fortune of doing that. And I must say, Vallei and Vlei Nature Reserve is by far one of the most underrated nature reserves and one of the least visited. It's really a stunning grassland. It's the source of the Crocodile River. And the grasslands in summer are not green. They are multicolored with all the orchids and wildflowers that are blooming during that time. So I highly recommend that you visit the nature reserve, that you contact friends of Vallei and Vlei. The email address is at the bottom there, so that you can find out more about the guided excursions that they host. So they get experts in various aspects of nature that take you on these guided tours through the reserve. Our assigned hiking trail is the Groot Suikerboskorp hiking trail. It's just outside of the town of Dalstrom, and it takes you to the top where you can overlook the town dam. And if you get hungry along the way, you can stop at the Cat and the Cow in the little hamlet of Tonteldoos. The accommodation from our supporters of the route are Santa's Fishing Estate, who are also BirdLife South Africa recommended accommodation, as well as Dalstrom on the dam. They offer chalets, but if you would like a more rustic experience, there are camping grounds. And then our last route takes us along the foothills of the Steenkampsberg. This is below the Escarpment birding route, and also along Quenya Dam, which receives all of the rainfall coming off of the mountains. And with escarpment come these cliffs, and within the cliffs are beautiful Afromontane forests. And so our bird for this route is the Narina trogon. So the start of the route has this purple border. The top 10 birds are southern bald ibis, crowned eagle, white-bellied quorn, white-starred robin, eastern clapperlark, southern chagra, short-tailed pipit, Narina trogon, fan-tailed grassbird, and orange-breasted waxbill. And so hopefully these routes have given you an experience of the different bird communities that you can see in the mountains. The points of interest are all focused at Vallei Kloof Estate. This is a dairy, but at the back of the dairy is a beautiful escarpment forest where you can hike through and see some unique birds. At the reception, you can collect maps and bird lists. And at the reception is also the restaurant that you can eat at after your hike. Supporters of the birding routes is the cowshed, as well as Vallei Kloof Estate. So you can find accommodation at those farms. Right, so we didn't just design these birding routes for birders. We designed them for people who love various aspects of nature. And so we've tried to develop awareness material about birds, about butterflies, dragonflies, wildflowers, and other aspects. And so we contacted experts or enthusiasts and even researchers in this field to develop that awareness material. And accompanying each is a species list of the species you can see in the Steenkampsberg. So you have something you can tick off. For the birds, we have 384 species. 29 of these are regionally threatened, and also 29 of these are endemics or near endemics. On the species list, you can find the common name, scientific name, likelihood of seeing based on Sabbat 2 reporting records, the habitat where you can find the bird, the months that they are present, the red data book threat status, as well as if they're endemic or not. The Steenkampsberg is also quite famous for its butterflies, and this is likely due to the many wildflowers and orchids that occur on the plateau. So you'll find 106 species, and here's the list or the top 10 species you can see. But I'd just like to point out the Lost Valley cupid, as well as the Vallei and Vlei bronze speckled widow. These are two species that you can only find here in the Steenkampsberg. So if you are an enthusiastic lepidopterist, I suggest that you come and visit to take a photograph of those two. The dragonflies aren't as numerous as the butterflies. You'll find far more species in the low veld in the savanna type habitats, but there are 54 species. But what the dragonflies do make up for is the number of endemics that you can find. And so again, from the top 10 list, the 3 endemics, or actually there's many more endemics, but the top 3 that we have on our list is the spring watertail sprite, the goldtail, and mountain malachite. For our wildflowers, we have over 270 species. Of these, 54 are South African endemics, and 14 are found only here in the Steenkampsberg montane grassland. That's the dominant habitat type for the area. And 17 of these are threatened. And again, here's just the top 10 list, and you can find out the full species list on the webpage. I'm no expert in geology, but I am aware that there's some people who chase after rocks. So we've also tried to provide some information on the geology of the area. So we discuss a bit about the formation of the Steenkampsberg, and things and just interesting facts like the maximum elevation, that the Berg mountain of 2,332 meters above sea level. So that's the highest point in the province. While you're driving along these birding routes, you'll also see these formations, these tombstone-like formations. That's the weathering of the Dahlstrom formation. They really are incredible, often happening in rows, and parallel to one another. We also discuss a bit about the human history of the area, so about the town of Dahlstrom specifically. We give you quite an in-depth timeline, and from these you can find some very interesting facts, and I've just highlighted a few here, such as in 1880, a company was formed in Amsterdam by Walterus Dahl, after whom the town is named, and this company was meant to raise funds for the Afrikaners who suffered during the First Anglo-Boer War. So the town, this company actually bought 2 farms, which then formed the town of Dahlstrom, and where they could settle some of these Afrikaners who were misplaced during the war. In 1893, the town received town status by President Paul Kruger, and the population size reached 100 people. It surprisingly kept quite small since then, which we're grateful for. In 1916, the very famous Vaid family established, and I think they're in their 4th generation now, and you can visit the blue shop on Blue Crane Drive. The shop is over 100 years old. In 1934, the memorial stone was re-erected in the Memorial Garden. So that's the park just off the town, and it just discusses about some of this founding history of the town. The Epilepsy Care Center was established in 1979, and that's still going quite strong. And in 1989, the Dahlstrom Inn was the hiding place of the first Sunday Times Finders Keepers £1,000,000, and that really put the town on the map. There is a small little museum that you can also visit, where you can see some more photographs and artifacts from the town's history. And then we also discuss a bit about the conservation work that we are doing in the landscape that you'll be touring. So I discussed some of the work that we're doing with the white-winged flufftail in terms of research, as well as the recently declared Middelpunt Nature Reserve and designation as a Ramsar site. We discussed the Greater Lakenvlei protected environment, which is being expanded currently, as well as how we are involved at Vallei and Vlei Nature Reserve. And then I just want to talk about the Escarpment Bird Club. So it's no longer a formal bird club in that it accepts membership. It acts more as a virtual bird club using this sort of platform as well as others. And they are there to really serve birders and the general public. They really want to, make birders of people. So really look out for this platform and service that's available, that's being made freely available. As the Escarpment Bird Club, they support the enjoyment, conservation, and study of birds in the Mpumalanga Escarpment region. And if you would like to register your interest about some of the day outings that they have, you can follow the dedicated web page or website, as well as that email address. We've prepared a little video for you, but before we do so, I'd just like to thank some key individuals that were involved in the establishment of these birding routes. So firstly, a big thank you to the Escarpment Bird Club Chair, George Skinner. He had a lot of information and knowledge about all these back roads that helped with delineating the route. And yeah, it's wonderful to see this route having been established. So thank you for all your input, George, and to the rest of the Escarpment Bird Club committee. Thank you. And then also to Colleen Miller and Brendan Lloyd, graphic designers who helped with a lot of the layout of the awareness material. So you're really getting a professional look. And then also the communications team at BirdLife South Africa and Sipho Ndebele, who gave up their time to come film some of the routes and share those images and stories from the various people in the community. So yeah, thank you. And I hope you enjoy the video. And just lastly, you can already, visit the webpage if you want and start planning your visit to Dullstroom, to the Steenkampsberg. And I hope you will enjoy the Steenkampsberg birding route. Thank you.
All right, Carl, I'm just going to share your video quickly. You let me know when you can see it, please.
I can see it. Thanks.
Excellent. Hope you enjoy, everyone.
The Steenkampsberg Birding Routes is an initiative between BirdLife South Africa and the Escarpment Bird Club. We have established 3 local birding routes in and around the town of Dullstroom in the Steenkampsberg Mountains. We are trying to achieve 3 objectives with the project. Firstly, we are trying to create public awareness by drawing people into the countryside around Dullstroom so that they may see and appreciate nature. Secondly, we are trying to create a financial incentive for landowners to conserve biodiversity on their property, particularly those who derive income from ecotourism, whether it be accommodation or recreation. And thirdly, we are trying to create a platform on which we can build future projects, such as hiring and training community bird guides as a source of employment.
I'm very proud and privileged to be a resident in this beautiful part of the Mpumalanga Highlands, the Steenkampsberg Plateau, and we're very privileged to be involved with BirdLife South Africa and Kyle Lloyd in particular in the creation of these 3 bird routes, which are well known to us as locals but are not well known to the majority of birders across the country. So today we launched the Steenkampsberg birding routes, and we invite birders and nature lovers from the length and breadth of South Africa to come and enjoy a very special place.
Vallei and Vlei, I think, is one of the more special places in Mpumalanga. It's nice to see things happening on Vallei and Vlei, positive things like like what BirdLife is doing now with this introduction of the new bird routes. It's fantastic actually, because it introduces all these treasures to the tourist, and it's actually the tourist that makes these places possible. What I can remember, the birds actually, they are quite special. There were quite a few specials here, like your wattled cranes, your ground woodpeckers, of course your white-beaked flufftails, red-chested flufftails. It's amazing. So I think that just for birders, but for plant lovers, but for biodiversity in general, there are many, many special things here.
We are very passionate about birds. In fact, it was one of the things that we started off as a couple, our hobby. We take an hour to do a kilometre in the Kruger Park, just to give you an idea. We do love birding, we're passionate about wildlife, so we're very excited to be part of this project where we can assist in expanding the environment and protecting the species. We just hope that more younger people will get involved in birding. It's actually really therapeutic, it's relaxing. You cannot believe the world that opens up to you once you start birding.
I'm more than happy to support it because I think it's something that people should be aware of, particularly with birds becoming endangered or our whole environment as is. And yeah, as I say, I'm more than willing to support this, and I think people should be made aware of what's going on and be given the opportunity to do something like this, because we do have quite a few people phone us and actually ask about birding and what birding trails are on. To date, we've had nothing until this is done, and I think it's an ingenious, wonderful thing to put onto our books and be able to support.
The Steenkampsberg's birding routes are very important in our area, both from a tourism point of view, bringing people to the area, and I think also there's just general lack of knowledge of people of what, they never look up, they're always looking at the ground, and you realise once you start looking up there's a whole different world out there, and there's just so much to learn. We've got the most amazing bird life in this area, so it's a fantastic route to follow and to actually support.
If we can sort of also get the people to be more aware of what's in the area, even the farmers, even the locals, what's in the area and stuff, to protect, to conserve, to go on the route, check it. And once you've checked it, you'll see, you know, and maybe if you're not a keen birder and you walk away thinking, this is amazing, I think I'm going to buy myself binoculars, a birding book, etc. I'm going to do birding now. And Steenkampsberg is absolutely, it's just, like I said before, magical place, and so much birding.
I hope you've enjoyed seeing a bit of what the Steenkampsberg has to offer. We now invite you to come and experience it for yourself. See you soon.
Sure. Well, Carl and George, I just want to say massive congratulations on everything that you've achieved so far with the birding routes. They really do look fantastic. I can see a lot of love coming from the Conservation Conversations audience. There's a few bird club chairs I saw commenting, and I hope that the bird clubs and all the different birders across South Africa go and use these routes and go and visit Dullstroom. I think this is really going to put the Steenkampsberg on the map. If it wasn't already, which it should have been, because it's one of the most fantastic birding areas, high altitude grassland birding areas in particular in the whole country. So Kyle and George, if you're still with us, you can turn your video on. I see George is with us. He's just got his video off, so we'll wait for George to join us. Those of you who would like to ask some questions of Kyle and George, you can do so in the Q&A box. As always, please make sure to put them there so I can see them rather than the chat box, because the chat box is going to be full of compliments and well wishes for Kyle and George and their endeavors. So Also just reminding everyone that we have no conservation conversations episode next week, but we do have the pre-African Bird Fair talks on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So you get 3 webinars in 1 week, lucky you. And you can do that on the registration link that I posted in the chat earlier if you just scroll up a little bit. So you can't access them through the conservation conversations links, but you can on the individual registrations. So let's have a look at the questions. I don't see George's video on yet. I can ask him to start his video and see if that helps. In the meantime, Carl, I think you're flying solo for now until we got George on, so you got some moral support. George, maybe this one is for you as the local bird club man. Alan Bedford Shaw wants to know about Cape Eagle owls, special for Dahlstrom, and wants to know, where can we find these on the various routes?
The traditional spot for the Cape Eagle owl is behind the town dam up on what's that cop called? Just behind the town dam. That's been traditionally the most noted site. But Frans Kricher and I, who was on the video earlier, have seen them in Vallei and Vlei, sort of behind the office and down towards the southeast, shall we say. There's a rocky outcrop and sort of an edge, a sharp edge, and they often are nesting in that sort of area as well. Those are the 2 main sites to our knowledge here.
Excellent, thank you, George. A question from Paula. She'd like to know how long, more or less, it takes you to do each route, each little sub-route. Kyle, maybe you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess it really depends on what type of birdie you are. But design the routes so that you're not out, until when the sun's setting. Hopefully, it can take you a day. That's why we have those eateries along the way, or restaurants along the way, so that if you do want a late morning lunch, you can stop and have that, and then carry on the route, or head back to Dahlstrom.
Okay, excellent. And what time of year would be the best to visit this area for birding? This is a question from Annika.
I'd say, look, as a bird club, we basically don't even have any activities or outings from May to July. So anytime from September through to March is a good time to visit the Steenkampsberg. Yeah, that's about any time during those times you can see plenty.
Yeah, it's very typical high veld, so a very distinct dry season and wet season, and obviously wet seasons over the spring summer months. So the first spring rains come in September and sort of peter out in March. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Question from Penny Abbott, perhaps for you, Kyle. Are there any community bird guides available yet on the route?
Unfortunately not. So this was hopefully one of the first steps towards accomplishing that task. So it's really establishing that platform on which we can build, one of which is hopefully a community bird guide.
Yeah, I think if I can add to that as the person at BirdLife oversees the training, it's a prime area, absolutely, to have at least 1, if not 2 community bird guides taking people around. The problem is always financing, and getting someone onto a course is not an easy thing to do. It costs upwards of 100,000 Rand usually for an in situ intensive course, given that they have to do a proper government recognized qualification. So that is always the issue standing in the way. If there's some generous benefactor who wants to put that money towards someone being trained, then we can make a plan. But I think this is an excellent step towards creating that market for a local guide. And hopefully someone local will step up and an opportunity will be made available. I think it would be wonderful to have a community guide there. There's a question from Henny Visser, talking about budgets needed to do these routes. Is there, well, money and time budgets? You know, if you really want to do these properly, what sort of outlay are you looking at, and how long should you spend to explore these routes?
I'd suggest that at least a weekend would be the ideal time. The problem is you've got 3 routes in different directions, and to do them properly, I would say you need a weekend per route. Don't you agree, Kyle?
Yeah.
To really enjoy these routes.
Yeah, and in terms of budget as well, I mean, it depends on the experience you want to have. I mean, you could, just stay in town, or you could, find accommodation in the accommodation that we've recommended in the farmlands, which I think would be a far better birding experience by walking around those farms. They're trying to accommodate birders, so they've given you the resources to go and explore their farm and to continue that with birding. Or you could just do a day trip. If you're from Gauteng, you could drive up and then head back. So it's just a matter of fuel then.
Exactly. All right. So Penny has said, well, I guess it's more of a compliment than a question to begin with. It's just that your material is really world class. Now, I'd like to echo that. The amount of detail that you guys have included and the way that you've presented it is really, really top class. And she wanted to know, did you draw on any other material worldwide? Did you base your routes on any other birding sites globally or locally? How did you come up with the concepts and your materials?
George's head. Yeah, no, it's
local and lekker.
Yeah, no, I was really discussing it and trying to find innovative ways. I mean, I think a lot of people are moving online, and so we wanted to create an experience where you just scan the QR code and you can start birding. You have all that information and resources available to you, rather than, a lot of bird clubs are struggling with membership and particularly getting the youth involved in that. But moving on to perhaps electronic platforms would encourage more people to get into birdings and hopefully join their local bird club.
Yeah, I must compliment Kyle on the tech stuff, because obviously that's not my forte. And the structure of it, Kyle, was fantastic, really outstanding. Yeah, and I do believe that this is going to broaden the interest in birding nationally. If this kind of project could be rolled out into other similar areas, like the Garden Route, as an example, or the Drakensberg in KZN, little mini regions could benefit from this type of project, and would draw people that are not necessarily bird club types, which I said to Mark, I think is a threatened species.
Yeah, I think you've both done an exceptional job with this. It's really setting new standards, not only in South Africa. So from what I've seen internationally, this is right up there in terms of birding routes and information. And hopefully it has the intended effect. I hope there's sufficient take up of these routes, and the accommodations all buy in, and everything works out, because as you say, George, it would be amazing to have this rolled out to other areas as well. A question from Annika about the hiking routes that you've mentioned, Kyle. Could you give these a difficulty rating? How fit do you have to be?
Yeah, so fortunately, 2 of the routes have different types of trails, so it really depends on your fitness level, and you can choose which route you would like to do. So they're all graded in terms of difficulty. The Groot-Suikerboskorp isn't a lengthy one. I mean, you can extend the hike by going into the rest of the nature reserve. But yeah, it's fairly easy. A lot of people who visit the town walk up to the Koppie, and it gives you a beautiful overview of the town and the surrounding landscape. And then it's, yeah, so it's not, yeah, you've got choice. Yeah. But yeah, also being in the mountains, it's those kind of hiking routes. So yeah, if that helps.
Yeah, you all saw in the video that Kyle's a fairly tough man, fairly rugged. He will wear short shorts in the coldest Dahlstrom winter. So take anything he says about how tough things are outdoors with a grain of salt, a pinch of salt. There's a request here, Kyle, just for you to share your last slide with that QR code again. So I'm just going to let you do that by stopping my sharing screen. I'll just bring that up for everyone that's still left listening to the Q&A. While we do that, George, another one for you, a specific special request. Where can one find the wattled cranes? I think it was on the first route that was mentioned, but any specific tips?
Over the years, we've had a pair or so at Vallei and Vlei in the big sort of wetland to the north of the reserve. But to my knowledge, over the last 2 or 3 years, has nothing to do with COVID, but they have been pretty scarce. There was another single bird around the greater Lakenvlei route area, but that one seems to have disappeared. Its pair was killed in some kind of an accident, I think, and it wandered around for a while and then disappeared. It's no longer a great wattle crane area. Some of the old farmers will say it's got to do with the non-shooting of jackals. That in the old days the farmers used to kill the jackals, and so that the nesting by the wattle cranes in particular, but also the blue crane, was not interrupted to the extent that it is today. And I think predators is a major problem.
All right, thank you for that, George. A question that I'm sure you get asked fairly often, Carl, given that you are the Rock Jumper Fellow of White-winged Blufftail Conservation. We've been practicing that all in the lead up to this webinar. There's a question from George the Deck about, what is the realistic possibility of seeing a white-winged blufftail?
I was hoping I wouldn't get this one. It's one of the rarest birds in the world. I've spent a lot of time in wetlands and I've seen it twice. Yeah, and obviously not intentional, just going about doing research by putting up those monitoring stations with camera traps and acoustics. And so it was just a complete chance. Yeah, so it is very difficult, but some locals have been successful or fortunate enough. And just on that note, I mean, I can't go into details at this moment, but we are trying to develop ways of ethically viewing the bird. So we obviously don't want people to go trying flushing the bird now that we know that it breeds in these high elevation systems, and that your presence can be seen for months on end, trampling that three-dimensional vegetation layer that the bird is using. So we're trying to develop a way where you can view the bird without causing any damage to its habitat. I mean, it's critically endangered. The next step's extinction in the wild. So we're really trying to still give the public access to this bird so that they can develop a sense of care and memories about it. But at the same time, I mean, we're very aware that the bird survival is on the brink. So we're trying our best to balance the two desires or two needs.
Yeah, watch this space, I guess. Plans in the works. George, another specific bird question for you. African grass owl, any hopes of that?
In the 10 years that I've been in the area. We've only had one report, and that was on Santa Estate, to my knowledge. I don't know if others might have. I haven't looked at Sabab 2 records to see if any recent ones have been reported, but I know that there was one sighted on Santa Estate, probably about 2-3 years ago. And we had that one sighting of the corncrake at Lakenvlei. In fact, it was the day that we went out with Hanneline and co. Before you arrived, Kyle, I think. And there was a corncrake, but they're very rarely seen. But they obviously are about, you know. Keep your eyes peeled.
I have seen some grasshole in the Lakenvlei on my way to wetlands.
Have you?
Yeah, near that margin as you coming from the veld to the grasslands. Yeah, I mean the wetlands. Yeah, so they're out there. Yeah.
It's one of those birds that is very easy to miss, even though they are out there. So you're very, very lucky if you do see one. I'm going to end on one last question here, Carl. It's a chance for you to talk about white-winged flufftail conservation to finish off on. Seems appropriate. There's a question from Inika asking if the call of the white-winged flufftail has been recorded yet. Maybe you'd like to wax lyrical about that.
Yeah, another sensitive one. So yes, the bird's call was described for the first time and published in a scientific peer-reviewed journal in 2020. But as BirdLife South Africa and Middle Point Wetland Trust, who oversees the conservation of the species, the decision was made not to release the call to the public due to playbacks often being used to lure cryptic species and wetland birds. And obviously we don't want to disturb the very sensitive window period when the bird is breeding. And again, trying to find that ethical way of viewing the bird is our way of overcoming that obstacle. So yeah, we don't want to disturb the bird. We know they're territorial. We know the males call and display and keep these territories, and we don't want to come in with a speaker that chases the bird off and it's is no longer breeding. So yeah, we trying to find other solutions to that. I'm sure at some point the call will be shared with the public.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder for everyone that BirdLife South Africa has a birding code of ethics on our website. Anyone who is a member of the South Africa Listers Club is also bound by that. And that mentions not using playback for birds who are breeding or which are breeding or are endangered. And this is, like Carl said, one of the rarest birds in the world, incredibly threatened. And this area around Dalstrom and the Steenkampsberg is one of the last strongholds of this really special bird. So we don't want anyone ruining that. The birds must always come first. That is at least the approach of BirdLife South Africa. So I think we'll cut it off there. We've hit 8 o'clock. All that remains for me to say is just a massive thank you again to our two presenters, Carl and George. It's been wonderful having you on. I cannot believe the levels to which you've taken this project. It's something that's been in the works for a few years, but you've really championed a wonderful endeavor to bring more birding tourism and more awareness of not just the birds, but the greater biodiversity and all the conservation and advocacy work that's going on in that area. So thank you so much for leading that. Thank you so much for sharing it with our Conservation Conversations audience tonight. Everyone really enjoyed it. If anyone would like to leave a message in the chat box, I'll leave the meeting open for another minute or two. So before we close, just any last thoughts from you, Carl, and then George before we close?
Yeah, I'd just say come visit. You never know, you might see a white-winged flufftail.
Yeah, really, it's an unexplored corner of South Africa. Our country has so much to offer, and this is really a picture of near pristine grasslands and wetlands. So yeah, even if you just enjoy landscapes, you want to just find a quiet time, a break, this is the place to come.
Yeah, that's strongly seconded. And if you are a lover of whiskey, as you all know I am, try the world of whiskey as well. That's another reason to visit Delstrom.
Yes.
Cheers to that, George. Cheers to that. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope we see you next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at the Pre-African Bird Fair virtual talks. Otherwise, we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time on Conservation Conversations with Dr. Ralph Bay. So you can find out more on our website about the upcoming episodes. But keep warm, everyone. Keep safe, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you and good night.